I want to ask you a question. And when you hear it, you're going to feel something tighten inside you. When you open your eyes in the morning, are you actually waking up? Or are you just transitioning from one day to the next? Think about it. How did you feel this morning? Did you feel your body's resistance as you got out of bed? That weight, that here we go again feeling? As if every morning you start at the same dark point in the same tunnel, the same steps, the same sounds, the same expectations. And you, the same man, the same woman, the same silence. Now, who put that silence there? For thousands of years, humans have talked about the difference between sleep and wakefulness. Philosophers, poets, revolutionaries, they all realized the same thing. A person can be physically awake, but zombified mentally, spiritually, existentially in a deep slumber. And this sleep is far more dangerous than the regular kind, because you don't just wake up from it on your own. Because this sleep doesn't hurt. In fact, it comforts you. It makes you feel safe. It tells you everything is fine. And that's exactly why it's lethal. Systems don't need iron chains to enslave you anymore. You've already put them on with your own hands, and you were smiling while you did it, because they taught you that these chains were actually a necklace, an engagement ring, a diploma, a paycheck, a rent receipt. They're all just different names for the same thing. But sometimes, just sometimes, you open your eyes in the middle of the night and ask yourself, is this it? Have you ever asked that? Because every person in history who asked that question changed something, either inside themselves or in the world, or both. History has taught us one thing: awakening doesn't happen overnight. Awakening comes when years of micro pains, swallowed rage, and suppressed questions finally overflow. One drop, one last drop. And in that moment, the world split in two, before and after. Some call this revolution. Some call it a breaking point. Some call it enlightenment. I just call it waking up. And the man who wrote the most jarring, raw, and painful account of this awakening did so in 1906, struggling to breathe under the suffocating oppression of Tsarist Russia. This man was the son of a poor Russian worker. He was orphaned at 9. He grew up on the streets. He worked in baker's apprentices, on riverboats, in blacksmith shops. He stared death in the face more than once. And he turned what he lived, what he witnessed, and what he felt into a novel. That novel shook the world. Governments banned it. Revolutionaries memorized it. Mothers wept over it. Fathers were ashamed by it. And today, right here in front of this screen, you are about to hear what that novel has to say to you. Because this story isn't over. This story begins every morning when your alarm goes off. It continues every time you pay a bill. It grows in every moment of stop, don't ask, just obey. And one day, somehow, that last drop will fall for you too. The question is, will you be ready, or will you still be asleep? Maxim Gorky. In Russian, this name means bitter, and it's a pseudonym. His real name was Alexei Maximovich Peshkov, but he chose to define himself by bitterness, because for him, bitterness was an abstract concept. It was the texture of his life. It was in the air he breathed, in the bread he ate, in every face he saw. He was born in 1868 in Nizhny Novgorod, on the banks of the Volga. His grandfather was a harsh, rigid man. His mother died young, his father even earlier, and young Alexei was educated in the most brutal school in the world, life. He roamed the streets, he scavenged for food in the trash, he worked every kind of backbreaking job, from baker's apprentice to icon painter, from fisherman to waiter. And on this journey, he forgot nothing, not a single detail. Before Gorky was a writer, he was a witness, and witnessing for him was a duty, a moral imperative. He wrote the novel Mother in 1906 while in exile in America, while fleeing the Tsarist government, and he had one goal in writing: to awaken those who sleep.
The novel is based on a true story. It was inspired by a workers' uprising in the town of Sormovo in 1902. There was a real mother, there was a real son, there was a real struggle. Gorky took that reality and turned it into a universal myth. And that myth is still alive today. Pelageya Vlasova. Say that name once, slowly. Feel it. Pelageya Vlasova. She isn't a hero, at least not at first. She's just a woman, middle-aged, exhausted, broken, crushed by every corner of her life. Her husband beat her for years, and she took it as a given because every woman in the neighborhood was living the same thing. Her neighbor, her sister, her mother, this was normal. This was just life. Her husband died, and Pelageya felt relief. She felt ashamed for feeling it, but she felt it anyway, because she no longer had to wait for that gruff voice, those heavy footsteps, that angry stare every evening. Now there was only her son, Pavel. Pavel grew up. He went to the factory, just like his father, just like every man in the neighborhood. But there was a difference. Pavel wasn't just working. Pavel was thinking. He was asking questions, and the questions he asked made him dangerous. You know the dangerous ones. They're the ones who ask why when everyone else says that's just how it is. They're the ones who lift their heads when everyone else bows down. And that simple act is sometimes the most revolutionary act of all. Pavel started reading banned books. He started going to secret meetings. Different kinds of people started coming to his house. Different voices, different ideas, a dream of a different future. And Pelageya watched all it with terror. Pavel was arrested, and Pelageya experienced the deepest fear she had ever known. But this time, the fear was different. This time, it wasn't just the fear of loss. There was something else inside it. Curiosity. What was that fire her son carried? That light in his eyes, that calmness. The man who remained calm even while being arrested, not out of lack of fear, but out of a calmness that comes from believing in something. Pelageya had never seen that kind of peace in her life, not in herself, not in her husband, not in her neighbors. Everyone was afraid. Everyone bowed down. Everyone said, that's just the way it is. Pavel was not afraid, and that created a crack inside Pelageya. Pavel was released from prison, and when he returned, he looked at his mother, truly looked at her, and he made an offer. Will you be with us, mother? That sentence, that single sentence, it split Pelageya's world in two, before and after. Because that question was the first time in her life she was seen as a human, not just as a mother, not just as a housewife, as a human, as a will, as a force. And Pelageya said yes. That yes is the heart of the novel. Everything begins after that yes.
Pelageya was now attending these meetings. She sat, she listened. She didn't understand everything, but she understood one thing. These people were different from anyone she had ever met. They moved not out of fear, but out of conviction. They weren't together for profit, but for meaning. And they looked at each other in a way Pelageya had never seen, as equals, as humans, as real. This simple observation was her revolution, the small personal revolution that comes before the grand one. Because Pelageya's true prison wasn't the system outside. The real prison was inside her own mind. For years, she had been taught, you are small, you are insignificant, you are just a tool for birthing, for serving, for staying silent. And now, in this basement, by this candlelight, someone was asking her, what do you think? Who had ever asked her that before? No one. For her entire life, Pelageya saw the factory as a natural part of existence, like the air, like the earth. It was always there. It would always be there. Questioning it had never even crossed her mind. But now she questions, and by questioning, she sees. Workers went in every morning. They came out every evening. Their hands wore out, their backs bent, their eyes grew dull.
And what did they get in return? Just enough to survive, just enough to show up tomorrow, just enough to feed the system. It was a cycle, calculated, conscious, designed. Pelageya saw this for the first time, and seeing is sometimes the heaviest burden of all. Pavel was objecting to this system, and that's why the system wanted to crush him. Pelageya finally understood, and understanding was transforming her. Pavel began speaking to the workers. He talked to them about their rights. He explained how the system worked, and at first people were hesitant. Some laughed, some walked away, some looked around in fear, because knowing was dangerous, and being dangerous was a luxury for someone with kids, for someone with an elderly mother, for someone who earned their bread from this factory. This was the system's cleverest weapon, to intimidate you not with oppression, but with responsibility. Look, you're dependent on others. Look, you have a family. Look, you have things to lose. And under the weight of those looks, people stayed silent. But Pavel kept talking. He didn't stop. And slowly, some people began to listen, truly listen, because what he said was true. And the truth, no matter how much you suppress it, will eventually surface. The day of the strike arrived, and Pelageya stood there and watched. She watched her son. She watched his friends. She watched these people with tired, crushed, dirty hands, and she saw something in them. Dignity. Perhaps for the first time in their lives, these people were standing without bowing. They were rising up. Even if just for a moment, they were saying no to the system. And that word, no, was the mother of all words. The authorities arrived, batons, horses, the forces of order, and that dignified crowd was dispersed. Pavel was arrested again. Others fled. Some were injured. Pelageya did not run. She stood her ground, and that was her true moment of birth. Not physical, her birth as a human being. Pavel spoke in court. He didn't offer a defense. He didn't apologize. With brutal honesty, he explained why he did it. He explained why the system was wrong. He spoke of the rights of the oppressed. The judges listened, and they decided exile. Pavel was to be exiled to Siberia, far away, cold, as distant as death itself. And Pelageya sat there in the courtroom, and she didn't cry because she no longer knew how to just cry. She knew how to do something. She started distributing them, the leaflets, right there in that moment, among the officials, in front of the judges, in the eyes of the public, and she was arrested. But that moment, that single moment, was history, because a mother had chosen to carry her son's ideas, despite the fear, despite her age, despite everything. That was the death of obedience.
Now, let me turn to you. You've listened to Pelageya's story, so what did you feel? Admiration? Pity? Perhaps a bit of unease? Let's give that unease a name. You find Pelageya interesting because she did what you haven't. She asked the question you couldn't. She gave the answer you couldn't. And that makes you uncomfortable, because deep down, you know that what she did is possible, but you don't do it. Why? Look, the pressure you face today doesn't look like Tsarist Russia. There are no batons, no dungeons, no exile. The system has undergone a much more sophisticated evolution. It no longer controls you from the outside, it controls you from within. They asked you, "Are you happy?" And you said yes, because you thought there was no point in objecting, because you don't know the alternatives, because everyone else said yes, so you said yes too. This is the most dangerous form of modern obedience: voluntary servitude. Freedom with a bill, happiness with a hashtag. In Gorky's time, people were aware of physical chains. They saw them, they felt them. The factory consumed them physically, and that pain sometimes led to an awakening. Your chains are invisible. Your chains are the phone screen you check the second you wake up. Your own life compared to the highlight reels of dozens of others. The way the question, "Am I good enough?" sinks a little deeper into you every day. And to find an answer to that question, you consume more, you perform more, you seek more validation. Is this cycle really any different from the factory cycle of 1906? Pelageya realized one day that her acceptance of her husband's violence as normal made her an accomplice. Not to the system, she was an accomplice to her own annihilation. And that moment of realization changed everything. What are you accepting as normal? Giving 5 days a week, the most vibrant, energetic hours of your life to someone else's projects? Constantly postponing your own voice, your own ideas, your own time? Saying one day, while living a life that is tired but unfulfilled, busy but meaningless? This is the most dangerous form of toxic positivity, the performance of everything is fine, the don't complain, be grateful ideology. And underneath it all, a suppressed, unnamed, unacknowledged rage. Pelageya recognized that rage, and she transformed it. What are you doing with yours? Why did Gorky write this novel? Not for propaganda, not to praise an ideology. Gorky wanted to tell people this: awakening is a choice, and you can make that choice at any moment. No matter how old you are, no matter how tired life has made you, no matter how much you've lost. Pelageya was a middle-aged, exhausted, uneducated, poor woman. The role society carved out for her was clear: shut up, serve, forget. And she said no to that role. That no came before any physical action. That no happened inside her first, silently, alone, in a moment no one saw. Look, the system sees you as a tool, and tools don't wake up. Tools don't ask questions. Tools don't imagine alternatives. That's why the system offers you busyness as a gift. It keeps you so busy that you don't have time to think. If you don't think, you don't question. If you don't question, you don't wake up. If you don't wake up, you remain a slave. And a slave who isn't aware they are a slave is the perfect slave. Pelageya broke that cycle. Can you break it? Gorky's novel doesn't have a happy ending. Pavel goes into exile. Pelageya is arrested. Leaflets are distributed, but the system doesn't collapse. The revolution doesn't come immediately. There is no victory, no happy ending. But there is something else. There is awakening. A permanent, irreversible, indestructible awakening. And Gorky tells us this: sometimes winning is simply surviving. Sometimes the greatest revolution is the one that happens inside you. And sometimes the right time to say no is never quite perfect. But you say no anyway, because saying no is the proof of your humanity. The system tells you you are alone. You can't change it, accept it. Gorky tells you everyone thought that, everyone was wrong. Pelageya didn't tear down a system alone, but she tore down the system inside herself. And that is the beginning of everything. I want to leave you with something, just one question, but take this question with you. Tonight, when you get into bed, ask yourself, who am I waking up for? The alarm goes off every morning, and you wake up. But for whom? For what? For what meaning? For what choice? For what no? Pelageya's story was written in 1906, but it continued this morning when your alarm went off, and it will ring again tomorrow morning. The question is, does that alarm pull you into the day as a tool, or does it wake you up as a human being? There is a difference, a massive difference. Gorky began the novel Mother with this sentence: every day the factory whistle bellowed. It bellows every day. The question is, do you hear it? And the next question, will you wake up? Family, we are here to see you, hear you, and think with you. This autopsy table is always open.